wish you could have been there last Saturday. I wish you could have seen what you had done. 1,000 people singing, we shall overcome, and we shall overcome. I wish you could have held.
Hello, my name is Karen Lopes. I'm with the Steering Committee of Missoula Advocates for Human Rights, and that is the local affiliate of the Montana Human Rights Network. Today in this program, we have with us Emily Santol, who's been another member of our steering committee. She is a student at the university, and she is the founder of Children's Second Chance. And we're going to talk with her today about children workers' human rights issue. So welcome, Emily.
Well, thank you.
Tell us how you got started and why you founded an organization called Children's Second Chance.
Well, in high school, in my history class, we got to do a research paper of anything of our choice, and I am a huge fan of the movie Newsies. I'm not sure if you've ever seen that, but it's about the newspaper boys in the industrial age and kind of the activism of children then. And so I started writing my paper on them and realized that child labor is not just an issue of the past, like that there's a lot of working children today, and I decided that I do have a chance to help stop some of the exploitation of children, and I wanted to try to do anything I could.
So how is it that children are still today exploited in this world?
According to the International Labor Organization, there's over 250 million children still involved in child labor, and pretty much every job that an adult does, there is a children also working that as well. And child labor still exists today because often of money, and children are easier to exploit. The workers can pay lower wages to them and can kind of mold them whatever they want to do, and there's a less unionizing amongst the children, just more vulnerable. And so it exists all around the world, specifically in developing countries, but there are some working children in America too who are on the fields or behind the factories instead of in schools.
And often you think of sweatshops too, situations in clothing, but there's a lot of children doing a lot of things to earn money for their families. So, and so you founded this organization, Children's Second Chance, and what kind of work do you do?
When I founded it at the university, I had hopes primarily of spreading awareness about the issue of child labor, because it was just by chance that I became aware of it through a history research paper. So I was going to use it, or just to spread awareness about it in the Missoula community, as well as help. One of our main projects we fund for is a school in Nepal that channels children out of child labor and into education, trying to combat the issue through primary education. But lately, one of our big projects is to go into local schools around the community and do speeches about child labor and children's rights, with the hopes of showing or educating the local children about the issue, but also to encourage them to pursue whatever passion they feel strongly about as far as activism, because a lot of the biggest child labor activists have been children, and we don't go into the schools necessarily hoping that they'll become child labor activists, but activists of whatever they're interested in, like even the environment. Or we did one speech in a school, and after we left, one one of the students got real involved in mountain lions and started raising money to help injured mountain lions. So,
Cool.
yeah.
Yeah, you're available for other groups too, because you did a group for the advocates at one time, a workshop for us, and I participated in that. And it's a very powerful workshop, including some role playing, where you put yourself in the position of what it's like, what the circumstances are like. So, and you also have traveled to Nepal to visit this school and to see some of the children. And could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I'd love to. Last September, I went over to Nepal with my friend to go volunteer and teach English in the schools, as well as interview working children. And unfortunately, it was very easy to find kids to interview. As soon as we first had a layover in Thailand, and as soon as we stepped off the bus, I saw a street vendor whom...
And you have a lot of pictures
boy,
here
yeah.
for us, yeah.
And he was just selling postcards to tourists. They were his primary business. But yeah, throughout my stay in Nepal and the travels through Thailand, there were working children everywhere, and they have the stories they tell. It wasn't all suffering, and there's a lot of hope with after interviewing the children too, because they have made it a way of life, but a way of life that should be changed. And I got to see both sides of child labor through the interviews with the working children, and also through interviewing kids at the school that I was teaching at, that was built to channel the kids out of child labor. And a lot of those students were at risk of being in child labor. They were from low caste families or low socioeconomic, but they're able to go to a school instead.
So you want to start telling us about your pictures? And I
Yeah.
see
This was
this is
the first child labor I saw. I didn't get a chance to interview him because I didn't know any of the language in Thailand. But this young boy was working in a garment factory and woke up when the sun rose and worked all day and then till the sun set at night. And he never left the factory. He slept and ate at the factory, and he didn't get paid. He just got 2 meals a day, and he was working with his family, so he got to have some contact with them. But there are a lot of children in a type of child labor called bonded labor, where the family is at such a poor state that middlemen will come into the villages and try to take advantage of the naivety or just of the villagers, and they'll say that they have this great internship for their child in the city, and the parents will take out a loan so they can help pay for or buy food for themselves or the rest of the family, and they'll send the child off with this middleman, and their great internship ends up being just this unskilled labor where the child would never be able to progress. Like tying carpets, like he just knows how to tie a knot over and over again, which doesn't give him any skill for life. So the bonded labor can also be known as a modern slavery, because the children never get to see their families, or they don't get paid. They just eat, sleep, and work on the workplace. So, but that type of child labor is more behind the closed doors or behind the scenes. There are a lot of laws existing in the world that combat or make it illegal to have this type of child labor, but it's not. There's a lot of loopholes, and it's not easily enforced.
And how do you get children out of that? What is the bonded? How long are they bonded? Bonded for a certain period of time, or is it?
Sometimes till they become adults. There's one boy, Iqbal Masai, who his parents originally took out a $12 loan, and it was taking him 2 to 3 years to pay off. And finally, he did end up escaping through a labor rights movement, but and sometimes the money that they earn never gets to their family, or the family, like a middleman will take it, or just there's a lot of corruption within it. So a child could be in the bonded labor till he runs away, or there's a lot of like abuse and death on the job too, and injury. So
The practice it's been in. A lot of people came to this country under that kind of bondage, and only they were mostly adults, and to have this still be perpetrated on children is a horrendous prospect. So
yeah.
You have more stories still, right?
Oh yes. This is a restaurant worker. He again wakes up early in the morning and goes to bed late at night, works like 14 to 16 hours a day, and he is 7 years old, and he works with his mother. She as well stays at the restaurant all day, and he's never been to school. I asked him what he wanted to do in his future, and he was very unsure. And they're paid so little because they're not aware of their rights, or the factory or the restaurant owner doesn't pay a living wage, that they are stuck in this type of labor, and does not give much future for this child. He'll probably have to stay in the restaurant business, and will never have a chance for school unless there's activism. And then I noticed while in Nepal that there were a lot more female workers than male. When I was teaching in the schools, I taught in a government school before I taught in the school that channels the children out of child labor, and I noticed that there is about 4 boys to 1 girl in the classroom. So this individual is, she's a 9-year-old, and she sells peanuts along the road, along this busy, polluted road all day. She had to leave her school. She was going for 2 years, but she had to leave school because her mother got sick, who was right there, but her brother got to stay in school. So now she's the sole provider of the family. And I don't believe that she will get a chance to go back to school. But in a lot of the countries where there are numerous female workers, they often are thought of as second-class citizens or have a lot less opportunities than boys. You will see a lot of children as young as 4 working in factories that are young girls.
It must have been discouraging for you to see all this firsthand when you were so sensitively responding to it, that sent you over there to find more.
Yeah.
It must have been hard to look at.
Yeah, I wrote an email to my dad one time during the journey, and I had lived with a couple host families, and on where I lived with the first family, there was a huge spider on the opposite wall, and rats would run up and down the banisters, and I emailed him and said that the physical challenges were fine. I didn't mind the rats, but it was when I had to see children, or the ones with the heart, that was the hardest, because I'd see children who were having such opposite childhoods than I had. and they have to go work their days away while I remember childhood of being outside playing with bubbles or swinging on swings, and they have to tie knots on a carpet or shovel rocks. So it was really challenging. I often would bike away sad.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of hope within the kids too, and I think the more they know what rights they should have, that they too will be strong about trying to get them.
Well, let's just keep going with the pictures and tell us about quite a few of them here.
Okay. This is the family that lived really close to where I was staying. They're all rag pickers, and they wake up early in the morning and they go through the streets looking for plastic bags and bottles and then reselling them at night. And they each earn 19 rupees a day, which is about 30 cents. And I interviewed Sunina. She's the 16-year-old girl in the blue dress, and I asked her how long she had been working, and she raised her hand about 3 feet from the ground. And I asked her if she had ever gone to school, and none of her brothers and sisters or herself had gone. And they live on the streets. They had already traveled about 20 miles to get into this area to go, because there's quite a few rag pickers in Nepal, and they're going into an area not frequently used amongst the rag pickers. But they had a long journey that night to get home. And most of the children I was able to interview was some of the less exploitative forms of child labor. A lot of the kids I interviewed did have some contact with their family and weren't in bonded labor, but I know that there was a lot. They were just more hidden, and the factory owners wouldn't be as up for me going in and interviewing. When I interviewed the garment factory worker I showed earlier, I had to pretend that I was really interested in purchasing the clothing, and that I was doing a school a school project about Nepal's clothing instead of really about Nepal's abuses towards children.
Very tricky. That was very brave. And this next picture just looks like a couple of walking bags with stick legs.
This is in Thailand. It's just another rag picker there. That's a popular job for children. They'll just go out in all sorts of different streets or in the garbage dumps, picking their way through the trash, and they get a lot of infections and cuts and bruises. And a lot of these children that are working as rag pickers don't live at home. They migrated from their village to the city, sometimes through having another job, and they ran away from that, or there's domestic abuse at home, and they come to the cities with hopes of earning money and achieving a better life, but they end up having to do petty jobs, and there's a lot of violence on the streets as well. Another job was the newspaper boys. It was interesting meeting up with them after having the newspaper boys of the industrial age start me off on this issue. And they would jump onto the buses and try to sell their papers to people traveling through. And I asked them if they got to keep all their money, but they said most of it they had to give back to a middleman and who gave them their papers. And they were all the newspaper boys I interviewed were 10 to 12 years old. And they as well slept on the streets. I think I have a picture of
a different job than the paper boys have here. Sometimes they're heavy loads they carry too,
Mm-hmm.
the heavy bundles.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, that's a good point to bring up, that there are like newspaper routes that kids do in the morning wouldn't really be considered child labor. It's when children are exploited to a point that they cannot grow or develop, or they don't have a chance to go to school, and they just don't have a chance to have a childhood. And a lot of these newspaper boys, they have to wake up 4 in the morning to get their papers and work till late in the evening. And if they don't sell their papers, they don't eat that night. So there's a lot of pressure to sell them.
A lot of opportunity to get sick and not be able to eat at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
One of the the harsher child laborers I saw was a stone quarry worker. And when I interviewed the factory owner, he claimed that the boy was 18 years old, but he looked like he was 13 years old. And once he would get the load of rocks on his head, he would sprint over to the place where he got to drop them off, because it was so painful to hold them. And he as well worked from sunrise to sunset.
How would you compare, like, the weight of what he was carrying to maybe how much he weighed?
I would say it was about the same, or maybe even a little heavier than.
And I was just hearing a story on NPR about one of the death camps in Germany being run that way as labor, and that was adults, and this is still children, and it's like putting them into a death camp.
Yeah, it is, because when they're so young, they're very vulnerable, and they don't really understand what they should have, like what rights they should have, and then they're thrown into these situations where they have to carry rocks all day, and that's their reality. And they do feel hunger pains, and they do want to go to sleep, and they do want to play with their peers, but they don't get the chance. And hopefully in time that they'll know their rights, that they are supposed to get to be fed when they're hungry and get to sleep when they're tired, and they get to learn. So it is kind of like a modern death camp, but with children. Their life expectancies are a lot lower, and a lot of more chances of injury, and a lot of the children working in stone quarry factories have spinal problems, and they're kind of hunched over when they're older, or real stunted growth as well, and the dust in the factory gives them a lot of lung problems. The kind of endless list of abuses they have to face.
All right, and okay, let's look at somebody else here.
Okay. Another big phenomenon in Nepal is street children. They, as I said earlier, they sometimes become street children because they originally were brought into the larger cities by middlemen trying to get them to work in their carpet factories, and as well as sometimes they leave home because there's violence at home, or there's just the curiosity of what the city's like, so they leave their family and their village and kind of their comforts and go to the city and to face a real hard life, like these street boys spent their day begging for money or working on the public transportation, calling out the routes, of the tuk-tuks and the buses, and collecting money for the passengers, or doing petty crime as well. And they usually form into groups of sort of street gangs just for protection. That's where they feel they find a family through other street children, and they do have some shelters in Nepal or in Kathmandu, the Nepal's capital city, where there's the most street children, and the shelters provide them food and some training. But one of the shelter's main goal is to educate them on their basic rights and give them basic skills for reading and writing and arithmetic, so if they do have a job, they won't be exploited.
So the protections that they're looking for from the street gang family are against what kind of things?
Oh, protecting them from when they do get hired from their bosses, or there's a lot of violence from the older gangs, or there's a lot of violence too from tourists. I was looking through the files at one of the shelters, and there are a lot of accounts of tourists, sexual abuse from the tourists. So the shelters try to protect the street children from that. And they did have some stories and they were trying to reunite them with their families.
Mm-hmm.
And but every once in a while, the kid will be reunited with his family, and then they'll see him again in the street. And that was something that was hard to realize, but necessary for me to realize, is that some children will be involved in child labor, or involved in labor, but you shouldn't just cast them away and ignore them. You should educate them so they know what to expect from their employers, as well as provide them with some basic knowledge so they can, if they choose to, they can progress.
So there are street employers that act virtually as pimps for whether they're sex workers or other kind of workers that kind of prey upon the children to get them into and treat them badly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a large child trafficking of young Nepali girls into Thailand, primarily Thailand and India, for that purpose, for the sexual trade. And yeah, it's an awful thing. There's a large sexual tourism industry, and the tourists believe that, or just the people, anyone believes that, or will prefer younger children because they'll think they won't have the sexual transmitted diseases, or that they're, I don't know, I don't understand it.
Right. But so that I understand they want to form these little families for themselves.
Yeah.
Okay, what else have you got?
I have another picture of a street child. Just seemed like he was kind of pondering what he wanted in his future. And I interviewed a couple street children and asked them what they wanted to do. And they all said that they wanted to go to school, they just couldn't afford it. And one of them really wanted to be a pilot. So there's not really or amongst the ones that I interviewed, there wasn't a dislike for the education system, and they just didn't feel they had enough access to it, or they felt that they had to work to survive, because there is a fee for government schools that a lot of families can't afford, or there's just not much awareness of the benefits of education, and there's just the people who want to exploit the children and make jobs in the city sound a lot better than the village.
So Children's Second Chance helps provide school, fund a school, and help pay the fee for some of the children to be able to go and and plus help out with the family being able to afford for them to be there? Or?
Yeah, the Children's Second Chance is funding for Sanku Palavari Community School in Nepal.
Say that again.
Oh, sorry. Sanku Palavari Community School. And it's kind of about 15 miles outside of Kathmandu. And all the children there are at risk of, or were at risk of being in child labor. And the funding that we provide, as well as the Minnesota Advocates for Human Rights, who have done most of the arranging through like the communicating with the village. But anyway, so this money that we send over pays for the students' fees, as well as the teacher's salary, and the school also provides free materials and a meal a day, so the families end up being, I mean, it's very beneficial for them because they have, their children get education as well as a solid meal, and they provide basic human rights training at this school too. And at first the families, I think, were sending their kids to school because they did get food. They didn't quite understand the benefits of education, but they had a large gathering of the parents and about sustaining the school and how they reacted to it. And one parent claimed that she would only eat one meal a day if it meant that her child could go to school. So there is more sacrifices amongst the parents too, realizing the importance of education, and the children at the school are having easier access to that education as well.
So you have a picture of some
Yeah, I do.
where you taught for a while.
This is one of the girls in the kindergarten class, dressed for success, I guess she.
She's cute.
I'm hoping that will be a style that will soon be in Missoula, the high worn skirts. And there's 140 students right now, but they're hoping to get to 200. And the enrollment has to be, there has to be at least 50% female because of the females being thought of as second-class citizens. They want to provide more opportunity for the girls.
So what type of industry is there that these the children who aren't in school are working in that area?
In that area, primarily agriculture, but there was a large migration of the kids to the stone quarries and brick factories, kind of like the picture showed earlier of the boy holding the basket of stones. And one of the girls, she's one of the oldest in her class, and all of her older sisters have been working on, or laborers on other people's fields, or domestic workers. So she's the first of the family to get to go to school and kind of
So
shy away.
they've been rescued from the worst kind of physical labor.
Yeah.
To be
Yeah.
able to go to these schools.
They were saying about 20% of those children in the village were going into stone quarry workers, or going to be stone quarry workers. So.
And so how is somebody able to support or donate to Children's Second Chance?
They could either send a check to the university, Children's Second Chance at the university, or a lot of or it could raise money like through schools. And there's a lot of different organizations out there that are helping, not just Sanku Palavari Community School, but other schools. One of the most well-known child labor activists who started when he was 12 years old is Craig Keelenberger, and he started Free the Children, and they've built hundreds of schools all around the world, and one of their mottos is or for children, with children, like they they've realized how large of a voice children have, and so they have a lot of websites, or a really informative website. I think it's just www.freethechildren.com. But yeah, just supporting anything we do. We do have some interesting fundraisers. The other couple weeks ago, we drew a chalk outline of a child labor, and people would throw their coins when they walked by. We're still trying to increase our membership and become.
And there's other things that students are doing too. There's the United Students Against Workshops, which is a national organization. There's a chapter on campus, right?
Yeah.
And we're working for getting non-sweatshop university clothing.
Mhm. Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, the Students Against Sweatshops is trying to get the university to sign on the Workers' Rights Consortium, which is kind of like a watchdog organization that makes sure that where the university gets its clothing, the corporation has fair labor practices, and the workers are giving a living wage. And how it works is you sign on to the contract, and you have to give, I believe, 1% of whatever you earn back into the organization of the Workers' Rights Consortium, or 1% of whatever you sell, so they can keep providing a watchdog force.
And then what kind of price does that add onto the cost of, say, a sweatshirt or something? Do you have any idea?
I don't believe, it'll be very minimal.
It usually is like an extremely small amount that would bring it up to a fair wage that the actual worker would receive. Like a dime per shirt or something like that.
Yeah.
I wish I had the solid figures, but you can certainly do that research. People can certainly do that research on some of the websites. We'll be giving them a little bit. And why won't the university sign that?
Well, currently they're on the collegiate licensing company, and it just hasn't been investigated enough, I think. I think kind of for convenience, and the collegiate licensing company does claim that they go into a select few factories to see how the labor conditions are, but there's still a lot of room for exploitation in there, and with the Workers' Rights Consortium, it's guaranteed that.
So the collegiate licensing company might be given a C, and Workers' Rights Consortium would definitely be given an A for reporting on what was being done.
And I think to make the money commitment too, that they do have to give some money back to the Workers' Rights Consortium, I think that slows down the university's decision. But they have been going, having interviews with the bookstore, and the bookstore is the UM bookstore is interested in supporting, and they've done numerous petitions around campus to see how the students respond, and a lot of students are really supporting.
Well, just having the goodwill, I'd say, would be some kind of benefit to the university to be able to say that these are child labor free, and can certainly garner ear well if you know that something that you're buying has been child labor made or sweatshop made, which brings in, a lot of guilt for us when we go to the store. It's always hard to try to figure out what you're going to get, and how you're going to make up for what you're buying, perhaps to to the child that made it or the
Yeah.
person that made it in the sweatshop, and how you're going to help. But there are lots of local responses that people can do too. There's an organization here called Headwaters that conducts voluntary simplicity study groups, and Janine Walker and Susan Dietrich and Sandy Bomer have run some of those, just to help you be supportive and think of ways that you can become more of a simple liver and be helpful. Coming up here in Missoula, we have the exciting Global Justice Action Summit called Global Jazz, and they have a wonderful website, www.globaljazz, spelled JAS.org, and that's got a lot of links on it. And one of the links there is United Students Against Sweatshops, where people can check out what that organization is, and Partners for Global Justice site on there lists a lot of local companies and national links that are supportive of this summit that's coming up. That we would like to urge people to participate in attending part of that, and we're going to try to make sure that some of your information is on one of those tables that they have on there. I brought the National Green Pages that we get at home, and from Co-op America, and that is www.coopamerica.org. And they have, when you join them, they will send you a shopping guide, which I have here, the Green Pages, an investment guide, which is very helpful, and a green living guide. And with the investment guide, often it seems like we're not in control of the kind of investments that people's retirement monies are being put into or something. And my husband works for a corporation that didn't have any socially responsible choices for their investments that were being taken out of his paycheck for retirement. And it's a national organization, and he and one other worker in his company just in Missoula lobbied the national organization for a chance to have a socially responsible investment choice option in their portfolio, and the company now offers that. And so just a little lobbying can sometimes go a long way. And speaking of lobbying, there are lots of socially responsible investment funds out there that do pretty well, and some of them offer lobbying to corporations as well to make sure that the corporations are responsible or grow in responsibility towards their workers. And a lot of this small sweatshop stuff is fed down from big corporations into smaller and smaller packages, and there's certainly a ripple effect.
Mm-hmm.
I know the buyer has a huge responsibility. We just encountered one incident like that of our own here in Missoula, where my husband was trying to buy a pair of shoes, and he buys a pair of shoes every 3 years. He's got very narrow feet, and they're hard to fit. And he wanted to buy from a socially responsible company that didn't use sweatshops. And we went to the shop where they used to sell the Red Wing shoes, and they're being discontinued. The owner said he had put $10,000 into advertising for these shoes in the last year and had zero increase in sales because people didn't want to spend the money for a socially responsible shoe. And he also said that most of the companies are losing their their will to stay socially responsible because of lack of sales and the inability to compete, and that they're also discontinuing making narrow sizes amongst other things. So narrow-sized feet stick up for your rights as well as for the rights of workers. Those are all good websites, Co-op America.org, ResponsibleShopper.org, and Sweatshops.org, and they can lead you to a lot of links and a lot of other information. And another thing that we've done is Working Assets. This is our telephone bill. And WorkingAssets.com is a telephone company that has a lot of links, and they put a percentage of their money towards global responsibility as well, and part of it's towards anti-sweatshop work. So there's a lot a person can do here. I would like to see people be able to, if they're going to go out and buy, a whole wardrobe for school or for work, to donate a percentage of that money that they have spent towards an organization that helps fight the kind of injustice and inhumanity that you've shown us tonight.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
It would be very helpful.
Yeah.
And we try to do that, and challenge people to do that.
Yeah.
Do you have any last few words you would like to say?
Well, just thank you for finding me here tonight. And as you said, people can make a huge difference.
You certainly have.
Thanks. But one of the authors of the books that I researched when I was in high school had a quote that's, because he's also connected with the school in Nepal, and he was asked once why Nepal, or why these 200 children, and he said, kind of like when Schindler's List saved those 200 people, it's just because you can, and just to take advantage of your voice and just try to help people that don't have one right now, don't have a voice right now. And I hope the Missoula community is interested in helping with this fight to stop the exploitation of children, and hopefully I have a picture of some girls and hopefully children can have childhoods playing with bubbles and learning and growing like every child deserves.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank you.
I wish you could have been there last Saturday. I wish you could have seen what you had done. 1,000 people singing, "We shall overcome, and we shall overcome." I wish you could have held the baby, shaken and afraid. I wonder if you had looked into his eyes, could you have lit those deadly flames? Did you think you could just erase their names? Well,